Welcome to my Best 11 podcast. Today we are joined by a defender who started his career at Sheffield Wednesday, has played for a number of teams, Notts County, Forest Green, Scarborough, Torquay, Kidderminster, Bath, and also Mousehole as well. Managed a couple of clubs as well, particularly most notably Torquay, and he's currently Exeter's head of coaching and player development. Today we are joined by the man most people know as Nico. But in case you're looking it up, Kevin Nicolson. How are you, Nico?
I am very good. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Marvin, getting Nico on. I know we've had a bit of laughs off air so far. Did you come up against Nico? I was trying to work it out.
I don't know. When did you start playing, Nico? What season was it?
So I signed pro in '97 at Sheffield Wednesday, but I only ever played once for them. So I'm pretty sure you weren't playing in that game. And then I started playing regularly at Northampton, and I played against Luton on my debut for them. And Mance was playing.
Oh, he was he?
What year was it? The lad. It was at Sixfields. I think it ended 1-1. Luton had Stuart Douglas up front. There was a Finnish, I think it was a Finnish fullback that was up against me. I can't remember his name. I did the one piece.
Henning? Was it Henning? Helen?
Yeah,
it sounds about right.
Blonde hair, bright blonde hair.
Yeah, this would have been 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
I'm
going to go Helen, Petri, Helen?
That sounds about right. Mance told me it was brilliant, but I did probably the first and last ever piece of skill that came off in my footballing career against him. You know, the one where you knock it one way and run the other. And I wasn't quick. I wasn't capable of doing it. I was just young and stupid. So I thought I'd try it. And he must have either got caught laughing that I even tried it, or I don't know how it worked, but I got it the other side. And I've never, ever pulled that off since, even against my kids, to be honest. So, he had a bad time on that game. And that was my debut. And then I started the next game at Notts County. And that's how my move to Notts County came about, because I played well in that game, and I was on non-contract form, so it was like a 7-day approach, and off I went.
No, awesome. So that probably not then, because I came that was the end 2001 was, I mean, very rarely. I was like probably coming on a sub back then, so no, I don't think we would have crashed paths. So
probably not.
Making me feel old now. Look at that. So now I'm my age. Now I'm old now.
I'm not. I was never going to ask that, but yeah, no, I'm impressed. I thought that you'd have been playing a bit longer than that. So no, well played. You looked after yourself.
Definitely. Beauty and brawn with Marvin. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through Nico's best 11 players he's ever set foot on a pitch with. So first off, we're going to jump straight in and look at formation. Now, I know you're coaching at the moment. You mentioned you're not doing as much as you'd like, but what's your favourite coaching and formation? And have you tailored it for your players, or are you rigid and they have to fit in?
To be honest, that's one of those where when I was managing at Torquay, I just had to play whatever worked, whatever we could with the players that we had, because I couldn't really bring anybody in. So at Torquay, it was either a 4-2-3-1 or a diamond is where I had my best run of games. And I really like the diamond, but you need very specialised players in some of those positions to be able to pull it off effectively. I would probably normally be a 4-2-3-1 guy. I don't particularly like 3 at the back, but in my current role, we have to give the young kids, because it's like under 23s, under 18s and below, you have to give them an example. You have to give them experience of all the different formations. So you'll play, I cannot stand this 3-6-1 where you have like a box in midfield. I just think it's too much. I'm not a fan. But at the same time, I've seen it work really well. And we have to show the kids that, because they might need to play it at some point. My personal preference is probably a 4-2-3-1 with a diamond as a backup. But yeah, I've had.
What have you gone for this one? What have you gone for your team?
I'm going to go with a 4-2-3-1, or call it a 4-3-3 in this sense, because I think that gets the guys in.
Okay, so we're going to jump straight in. Goalkeepers, over to you. If you can give us a few clues, On the way, we'll try and guess them, and the listeners at home will try and guess as well. And then if you want to have some honourable mentions so you don't offend anybody, feel free.
Okay. So this is one of those where I only played with him once. And so I would have said Bobby Olejnik. Bobby Olejnik would have been the one that I played with most. I played a season with him at Torquay. He went on and played at Peterborough and Exeter. He had the best ever single season that a goalkeeper ever had while I played. He was unbeatable, absolutely magnificent. And he cashed in and he went off and played in the Championship. He did some good things, and he's recently retired. So if it was about somebody who I played regularly with, I'd go with Bob. But in terms of this guy, it's somebody that was there at the very beginning of my career. He played for England. I'm not sure how many times. He probably got overlooked more than he should have done. He certainly, if you remember way back now, there was England B, and he definitely played a fair few games for them. He scored the best penalty I've ever seen in a penalty shootout against Wolves in a cup competition. He's a legend at Sheffield Wednesday. He wasn't athletically the most beautiful player to look at. It could be said he was a little bit heavy at times. And yeah, he was just outstanding. His delivery before goalkeepers became, like nowadays, they have to be able to play with their feet. They have to be able to kind of pick people out from distance. They have to be comfortable on the floor. He had that level of delivery and accuracy certainly with his longer passing way before it became a real thing.
He left-footed keeper?
Yeah.
I can even think of one. I mean, Andrew, I can only think of the only one I can think of is... Do you know who,
Marvin?
Andrew?
Yeah, I've got a name in my head, but go on, Marv.
Pressman?
Kevin Pressman.
Yeah?
Kevin Pressman. Yeah. Magnificent goalkeeper. Like just... very much in the kind of the mould of the Neville Southall. Didn't look fantastic in his kit, but agile, strong. His delivery long was outstanding. Great guy. And like I say, I feel like I'm cheating on that one a little bit because it was 3 years working with him and kind of one appearance, but at the same time, I didn't really play with him. I'm clutching a bit there.
But it's your 11 though, Nico. So at the end of the day, you pick it and you have your reasons. So
the main reason is just to make sure anybody listening knows that I did actually play one game in the Championship. So I'm doing it purely for my own good. So yeah, I never set foot in the Premier League. I got on the bench but never got on, and that's probably a good thing for the team. And then won in the Championship, and it was a beautiful game. I just can't have done as well as I thought. I never got back.
Was he in the normal mould as what goalkeepers are, a little bit daft? Because he comes across. I mean, I didn't know him or anything, but he's not. Was he vocal? Because it doesn't seem like he's a shouter or anything like that.
No, I'm not sure. He's as sensible as goalkeepers get. I think, like you touched on there, all goalkeepers are slightly mental. They're normally the ones that you can't quite figure out. And if it was an all-time weird 11, then there's definitely one or two other keepers that would get in ahead of Prezi. But in terms of out-and-out ability and the fact that he played at the top level, I can't move past that one. But honourable mention to Bobby Olejnik, who in the 2011-12 season was just out of this world. Absolutely ridiculously good.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned they're coming through at Sheffield Wednesday. And obviously at that time they had, and in the Premier League, they had so many huge players in that team, some fantastic players. I'm not going to mention too many in case you mention them later on. But what was that like in the dressing room as a youngster coming through? Because you hear different stories. I know David Pleat mentioned that Sheffield Wednesday team was a little bit difficult at times. It was very much a case of we're here for ourselves. Was it like that when you were there, or that kind of gone?
Well, David Pleat was my first manager. So he was, when I initially went to Sheffield Wednesday, it was Trevor Francis, and he left while I went to a place called Lillishall, which was like the national school back in the day. It's what academies are based on now. And when I out of Lilleshall, that was my final 2 years at school, Trevor Francis had moved on and David Pleat was in charge. And Pleat, was like, he knew everything there was to know about every player in the country. He could tell you the strengths and weaknesses of Halifax reserves. You know, he just knew everything about football.
He still does.
Yeah, I can imagine. But he was right at the beginning of where I think the current, you know, like your superstars, your absolute characters, people where player power, I think, it was just starting to creep in. I think, you know, go back really in the day and the manager told you what to do and you did it. And if you didn't, you were gone. It was just starting to get to that point. So I'm not going to pick any more Sheffield Wednesday players in my all-time 11 purely because of what I said there. I'm clutching a bit. So I think we could probably talk about the guys. So Di Canio was in the building. I mean, you imagine training every day with somebody with his ability. He was a thoroughly good guy, but he was also highly strung, had an ego, and was at one point came in with his own personal trainer and did his own thing in pre-season for a while, having come back about a week late. There was one stage at Sheffield Wednesday where I was training in the reserves, and I had Di Canio's personal fitness trainer was with us. Benito Carboni brought his hairdresser in, so he was there. I remember doing a crossing and finishing session with Michael Vaughan, the England cricket captain, because he was mates with Richie Humphries, and he was a very good footballer. But it was bizarre because you're there as a young player coming through, trying to, you know, earn your stripes and get in the first team, and you've got. I mean, this was before Vaughan really got into England, so you've got this cricketer rocked up, lovely guy, but why am I doing crossing and finishing with a cricketer? Hey, he was arguably better than me. He was more two-footed for sure, but it was just a bizarre time. But you just had those egos. You had Des Walker coming to the end of his career there, and Des was, again, still magnificent. The purest of defenders, could barely pass a ball where he wanted it half the time, but you just did not get past Des Walker. He was still rapid. He was still in great condition. He was a leader. He was nasty. He was all those things. And when you're in the dressing room with that, it's quite overawing at the times. You know, that there's a lot of personality in there. There's a lot of stuff going off around you. You know, you had your more normal guys. That was probably back in the day where they wouldn't nowadays be Premier League players. With all due respect to them, it was that the game's moved on so much just in 20 years that nowadays they'd probably be, you know, championship stroke top League One type players. But then you had, you know, Peter Atherton was just a brilliant pro, great guy, but, you know, workmanlike. Ian Nolan, Graham Hyde, Emerson Tom was there. Yeah, again, massive personality, great fella, but you knew when he was in the building, you knew when he was in the room. And then a little bit further down my time, you had not Bob the Builder, but that's what they knew him as. Gerald. You had Gerald Sibon, and I don't know if I remember the Builder's first name now because we all knew him as Bob. But
Gerard the Builder, was that his name?
No,
it was. There was Gerald Sibon, who was about 6'5" and hit the ball harder than any player I've ever seen, and there was Gilles Sibon. Gilles the Builder, wasn't it? Yeah. Anderson. We had Petter Rudy, who's big in Norway, but I doubt anybody would ever remember him over here if you can't go back 20 years.
Yeah, people like Wim Jonk, what's his name? Wim Jonk.
So Wim Jonk came in. Wim Jonk had the best agent in the world. He was obviously a magnificent player himself. He came in and it kind of got out to us that he had got a clause in his contract where he got his appearance money as long as he wasn't dropped, and he got injured. So he picked up a stupid amount of money over 6 months without setting foot on the pitch through appearance money. Just crazy stuff. But that was the beginning of it. You know, that was like the first time that these kind of big hitters had come in from abroad and really started, you know, it wasn't 100 grand a week then, but there was rumours knocking about that one or two of the guys were on 20 grand a week, which now is probably not far off your average Premier League player. But back then, that was your equivalent of 100 grand, 150 grand and so on.
Yeah.
Andy Hinchcliffe came in, which was brilliant for me because he was a left back. So I got to see an elite left back training every day. I got to see like the quality of that guy's left foot was through the roof. Picked up an ankle injury every time he was going to play against a quick winger. Didn't quite fancy that one very often. In fact, I got my debut because he came off. I came on in place of him. But what a top man! Like he was always had time for me, always had advice. He played for England. He'd had unbelievable times at Everton, and in the long term, it didn't really work out with him at Sheffield Wednesday. But I've got fond memories of just watching the guy train and thinking, he was of. Do you think about fullbacks back then? That was how they were. They were all looked like me, short, stocky. It was about delivery forward. You didn't see much overlapping knocking about. Whereas now it's completely different. I don't think I would have been not necessarily made it, but at one point in my younger age, I was seen as high prospects, and I don't think I'd get anywhere near that now because you've got to be almost a winger who can defend now and capable of sprinting and running 12K a game and so on. And I just sat behind the ball and moved it quite nicely and put a few long throws and free kicks in.
Yeah. Oh, interesting to hear about that Wednesday team. But we're on to fullbacks, so we'll jump in there. Where do you want to start? Your position or right back?
I'm assuming I'm not allowed to pick myself.
No, you can.
You can. No one's done it yet.
No one's done it, but feel free.
How have we managed that then? So you're telling me that people have not picked themselves, they've dropped themselves from their own best 11. But for me, I suppose there's never more than one fullback, left back at a club other than the early days. So
the most embarrassing one is the goalkeeper saying that there was always a keeper better than them. That's the most embarrassing one.
That's true. That's true. I'll go at right back then. I'll go for right back.
He's got to think of a left back now.
Yeah. No, I'm processing. Give me time. I'll be there. I'm fine. I can do that. So right back. The guy wouldn't want to play right back. He's got more teeth than a great white shark. He's got furry hair. He was similar to, if you think about the film The Waterboy, he spent most of his time passing the ball to the opposition and then trying to tackle them, which he could do from midfield or at right back. And he was very good at tackling, but he gave himself lots of practice. In his mind, he never made a mistake. It was always somebody else's fault. You've had him on your show, so you probably, you know I'm on about. But this is just my time now, so I'm going to milk this as long as I can. His right foot was limited. He was outstanding in pre-season. No one ever got near him when it came to running. It's just when the balls came out that the problem started.
So we put him out of his misery.
No.
Yeah, go on. We can carry on.
Nico wants another 5 minutes on this.
I know.
Are you going to describe his caricature that you got done on a Spanish beach, or what would that look like?
It would, yeah. So the hair of a sheep, the teeth of a shark. I'll be nice in a way. Not the worst looking guy in the world, but he's done well with his missus. I'd say, I think punching would be a fair comment. But yeah, he's a fantastic guy. You would have him in your changing room all day long, any day. And he would run through a wall for you, which he often had to because he was so busy giving the ball away.
So Lee Mansell is...
I don't know how you got that. I honestly don't know how you guessed. That's incredible work from you. Hey, if anybody else on this that's listening or looking in actually guessed it, then fair play to them, because I don't think I have a great deal away there from any kind of footballing ability. But yeah, Mance has to get in there. The right back one mainly to wind him up more than anything. That comment from Carragher about most fullbacks are failed midfield players and centre halves. He fills in that category. But he was all right in midfield. He wouldn't have been far off. I'd have given him a crack. Just the fact that we got promoted together and had some great times.
He did hate playing there, didn't he? Though he hated playing right back. He didn't enjoy playing there.
The irony is, the irony is he was really very good there. And actually, again, talking modern day fullbacks, he would be more, touching 6 foot, not bad in the air, could get up and down. I mean, he was as fit get. In pre-season, we always used to get the odd trialists come in and they'd challenge, like they'd come in, they'd want to make a mark and they'd kind of try and challenge him. And several times he's kind of come over and said, this guy, he's going to learn. And I've seen many, many people really hit walls while trying to beat him when it comes to running. He was just an out-and-out athlete. I've seen him lately. He's got a little belly going on. He's let himself go. But, he can't help that because he was the guy that just used to eat like chicken nuggets, beans and chips every night. I was the guy that went out every off-season. I'd eat perfectly. I wouldn't go out. I wouldn't drink. I'd like go in the off season. I'd be running my nuts off, desperately trying to get good because I was at the back of everything in pre-season. And then I'd come back and I'd see him do one run in the off season just because he could say to the manager that he'd done something. And he'd be eating crap and he'd be on the beach drinking beers and all the rest of it. And he'd come back and still be miles ahead of everybody. And I could never figure it out. But yeah, he was a leader on the pitch. We had so many run-ins on the pitch. It was funny. He never, ever... I used to call him the best deflector I've ever seen because he wouldn't take responsibility for any mistake. It was always somebody else. But we got promoted and he's done all right. He went off to Bristol Rovers and got another couple of promotions, scored at Wembley, which I'm sure he never stopped talking about when he was chatting to you guys. And just a top guy.
I don't know where to start. Marvin?
I might jump in on the bandwagon now and just like kill him by not talking about him and talking to you now, Nico, because this is your podcast. I want to flip back now to you mentioned about the Lilleshall stuff. So you must have been obviously he was there for 2 years as a kid.
Yeah. It was the last 2 years of school. So you did your GCSEs. You went to a normal school when you were doing it. It wasn't like a boarding school or anything, but you lived at Lilleshall. And for those that are old enough to know, Lilleshall was what SGP is, St George's Park. That's what that was. So any injured players used to go there. England had trained there from time to time. There would be on-site gymnastics. So the national level gymnasts would live there and train there. There was a lot going on, but it was essentially what St George's Park is now.
Yeah, but how I remember it, they normally pick the best 20 or whatever players on the whole of the country. So, I mean, was there like other clubs apart from Sheffield Wednesday who?
Yeah. So it was
knocking on the door.
It was a national system. It was a national. So the best 16 players went there. You went for 2 years. So obviously there was a junior year and a senior year. So in my senior year, the first year I went, the guys that were a year older than me were people like Michael Owen, Wes Brown, Michael Ball, some big hitters that went on and had massive careers. In my year, we had Scott Parker, Francis Jeffers, Alan Smith, who he left quite early on because he couldn't deal with being away from home and that kind of stuff. So it was quite a challenge. It was quite a test for people. But it was always those best 16. So I was lucky enough to play for England schoolboys and captain them. I was lucky enough to play for England under 16s and had some incredible experiences. We went over, we played Brazil in Brazil and Ronaldinho was playing for them. So when anybody kind of talks about those things, it was just mind-blowing what opportunity you got. And and again, just very different. Most of us were early developers. Nowadays, especially in my role, I'm aware of late developers, kids that aren't 6'3" by the time they're 12 and capable of winning games. But you have to look for the football intelligence. You have to look for the mind and the body will get there. Whereas back then, a lot of it was about winning games. So they just picked the best players at the time. And they were just starting to see, we had a couple of lads there. We had a lad called Mickey Lyons, who was like 5 foot tall. And they were just starting to see that there were late developers and it was important to look for ability, not just physicality. But yeah, I had an amazing 2 years there. Absolutely loved it. And it's just the nature of football is that I left Lilleshall at 16, signed pro at Sheffield Wednesday at 17 and got released at 20. That's how quick it turns. That's how quick things can go. And I was at Sheffield Wednesday at a tough time because they were on the downward spiral and a lot of the stuff like I touched on there, as much as it's quite funny when you look back on it now, obviously wasn't very conducive to a young player coming through and realising their potential. But yeah, it was incredible experiences, played with some great players. I'm currently trying to organise the 25th reunion, and that's an absolute nightmare because no one ever wants to get back to you and make it easy. So that'll be interesting. We're hoping to get together next summer now. And if we do, it'll be great to have a chat with a few of the boys.
Oh, fantastic.
Excellent. So we're going to go across to left back. Have you found someone to replace yourself?
Well, I'm not going to make
yourself it.
The obvious one, I've already spoke about him. I'd have to put Hinch in there. I'd have to put Andy Hinchcliffe in, but I can't give you any clues. And I can't make it a mystery now, can I? And I can't even do that about myself, although I could big myself up massively to annoy Mance even further. Make you say my name, which just sounds wrong. So we'll go with Andy Hinchcliffe.
Now, what you do is you put yourself in Mance's position.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, that wouldn't be a problem. Would not be a problem. But you got to give him something. So I think I'd have to go with Andy Hinchcliffe. You know, again, you're talking England international. You're talking one of the best left foots that has been in and around the Premier League. The kind of delivery. He was late 20s, early 30s when he signed. So he was never your modern day fullback. He was never an overlapping up and down the sides, but given the ball and he could pick out anybody anywhere on a football pitch, and his delivery from set plays was match winning. You know, I think whether I meant to or not, my game ended up modelled on his. That was my super strength as well, in terms of, you know, wasn't great 1v1 defending, neither was he. Wasn't great at marauding forward, but from time to time timed it well and had the delivery at the end of it, which was good. And he was just the epitome of what a fullback of that era really should be. And he was.
Well, him and Graham Lasso. I remember those two around that kind of late 90s were definitely the England before Ashley Cole came along. They were the England kind of left hand side,
and that was it. And I think they were the last of that kind of breed at the top level. If you look down the leagues now, there's one or two still knocking about, but football evolves so fast. And they were the kind of last of that. You know, you had Gary Neville as your right back. And if you look at those guys, even Gary Neville towards the end of his career probably got forward more than he ever did towards the beginning, because that just wasn't the game then. So Hinchy, top guy, learned a lot from him. I bumped into him a couple of times since. You know, he does a bit of stuff now on Sky Sports with commentary and that kind of stuff. And he's just a thoroughly good guy who, just showed me what I needed at the time to become as good as I could be.
Excellent. So we're going to move to centre-backs, whichever side you want, left or right hand side.
Okay, so we'll go right-hand side to start with. Unless you've done your research, there's never a million years you're going to guess the guy, but I played with him at Torquay. He was a young lad on loan from Reading. He came on loan a couple of times and then he signed permanently. He was still young when he signed permanently, still early 20s. He established himself, then he had a bit of a rocky patch and fell out of it. And you probably didn't see the potential in the early years that he was there. 6 foot, athletic, quick, right-footed player. And then I left and I was gone for a season. But when I came back as manager, he was one of my players. And in my first year as manager there, we pulled off what they called the Great Escape. We were 12 points adrift of safety at the end of February, and we stayed up with 2 games to go. And in the last 3 or 4 months of that season, it was some of the best centre-half play I've seen. He was... I look at defenders often, they kind of go through 3 stages. First and foremost, they've got to just defend. So it's just don't get beat, get there and get rid of it. Second, they start to realise, those that have got that potential, they start to realise that I'm getting there in time now and I don't need to panic. So they start to maybe drop things into areas. This is lower league football, I think we're talking now, but they'll get there and they'll clip things over the top for strikers and they'll get the team up the pitch and they'll be all right. And when they get really confident and when they get really in control of what they do, they start stepping in, winning it, and then picking out passes. So now you're talking ball on the floor, zip to the next person and starting attacks. So they become the first attacker. And he got to that stage, and he did it over the period of about 2 months. He went from being quite erratic, kept getting booked all the time. He was frustrated where we were in the league, frustrated because he wasn't on a great deal of money, frustrated because he was just going through that period. And all of a sudden, by the end of it, he was absolutely magnificent, head and shoulders above anybody. And unfortunately, I lost him. He went and signed for Barnsley. We sold him to Barnsley for some good money, which the club needed at the time. He had a couple of years there, did well, got a move to Hull. He got diagnosed with cancer and survived it, beat it, and has been a big advocate for charity and pushing that stuff. He had a period of time where he was dating Alexandra Burke, which the X Factor winner. And then he ended up, this last couple of seasons, he's been at Rotherham, and he's had his injury issues and he's not played as much as he'd like to. But I just think back to those 3 months and just think that showed me how quickly things can turn in football and how quickly you can go from a good player to a great player if I think you're given the right environment, the right backing, and you're capable, you have the potential.
Andrew, have you got it?
No.
I mean, and the reason I said, I'm totally honest. Yes, normally we do research. I've been absolutely swamped.
No, I've done research. I'm just trying to think.
I've not had a chance, so that's done me. So I'll be honest. Not even a guess.
I don't want to embarrass names by throwing them out there in case they're totally wrong. So I'm going to chop one name out. Darren Ledbetter.
No. So
the only other, do you know what? The only other centre back I had for Torquay, but I don't think he's going to be on afterwards. I think he's current assistant manager there.
Downsy.
Downsy
was good. Downsy was good. He had no knees. He couldn't run, but he was just a warrior. But no, not.
That's the only other centre back I had in my mind from around that Torquay time.
Yeah. So
you have to tell us.
Angus MacDonald. Angus MacDonald. So he was a young lad at Reading. I say he came on loan to us, did okay on loan, had a second loan spell, I think he did, came permanently. So he probably was in and out of Torquay from about 2010 through to 2015 when I went back as manager. And then, he just took off and he's gone and he's played in the Championship and he's played at the top of League One. They've just been promoted at Rotherham. Yeah. He was just an outstanding guy. He always had money and women problems. And when he left, money problems went and he had a higher standard of women problem, I think. But his footballing ability, his athleticism, his composure, once he'd got to the bottom, we kind of spoke to him and figured out there were one or two issues that were causing red mist. And when we got hold of that, he just took off. So he's been unfortunate, obviously, young man to get cancer and come out the other side is incredible. And to have stayed mentally strong enough to be able to get through a period like that is incredibly powerful, and I think credit to him. And he's still going. I don't know how old he'd be now. I speak to him from time to time. I imagine he'll be kind of coming up late 20s now. But he's got plenty left in the tank, I think. And I'd like to see I don't know if he's going to stay at Rotherham next year. I've not seen if they've put anything out yet, but I'd love to see him top of League One Championship again for another few years.
Definitely. If he's a player and the player you say he is, then hopefully he gets a chance to push up in a Championship and have another go. Since Rotherham seems to be a bit yo-yo-y. So, who is next to Angus?
It's a tough one, this, really. I think, again, you have your bias, don't you? Because so many of my good times in my career were at Torquay, and you mentioned Downsy, who was really good, and Angus, obviously, on that side. But there's one guy who, if he was to hear this and I didn't put him in there, he'd call me, and so I don't want him to call me because you can't get him off the phone. So I'm going to go with the guy who was larger than life. He was one of the few non-footed players that I got to play with. He was renowned for heading the ball. He was Yeah, terrible off both feet. Really couldn't pass wind. He started off up north, played for teams. He's one of these guys where he is Marmite. There are one or two clubs he'll be seen as an absolute legend, and Rotherham would be one of those clubs, and Torquay would be another. And there are other clubs that would see him as the biggest waste of money that they've ever had. And
did he play for Portsmouth as well?
No, he played for Aldershot. He played for Burton. He played for. To be honest, he's also a bit of a journeyman. If I rolled off all of his clubs, we'd still be here tomorrow.
Is he naturally left-footed?
He's naturally not footed. He's terrible. He's naturally right-footed. He would claim that he could kick with his right foot, but I never really saw it. He shaved head or completely bald, which always, I think, again, works for fans. They love either the long flowing locks, they become legendary, or shaved head look scary types. And he was the second. I should know this. I've got a picture of someone in my head, but I can't think of a name. He was a beast. I tell the story all the time of when you talk to young players and you say about it's really important that you know who you are, because so many young players now they're exposed to so much football that they'll watch Messi play or Ronaldo and think, well, I'll do that then. Right. And you to tell them that, look, that's not for everybody. Like, you've got strengths and you need to show us those strengths and play to those strengths. And this guy knew his strengths and he played to them as well as anybody I've ever known. And I remember at Torquay once, he came out of the back, ball went up in the air, he headed it off the pitch and shouted in front of the pop stand at Torquay, where all the kind of hardcores are supporting, and shouted, "That's what he does." And then they all went.
Someone else had it. It was in Mansell, wasn't it? That's what I do.
That's what he does. And I used to say to him regularly, like, if I kick the ball off the pitch as much as you do, I'd get dropped at fullback. Whereas at centre half, he got there first, he won it, he headed it, he kicked it. Yep. He'd smashed people all over the place, and he was just incredibly effective.
You got it, Andrew?
I have.
Oh, well done. Well, go on then. I can't think of it. Who it is?
Guy Branston.
Guy Branston. I keep thinking of Guy Butters. That's all I think. And I knew
Guy Branston. Yes.
Guy Branston. Yeah. So again, I would, Brano, if you listen to this, apologies. I would say I've played with better centre halves, but the all round package and the season that he had when we got to the playoff final in League Two. He got in PFA Team of the Year for League Two that year. He was just a monster. We had to defend deep. You had me, who was really slow. You had him, who was as slow, if not slower. We defended deep. We had to. Couldn't leave space in behind us. But you put the ball in the box and no one's getting near him. And it was frightening how.
Did he score a lot as well then?
He was decent.
Was he set pieces or not?
Yeah, I don't know how many he got that year, but he would have been. He was always a threat from set plays. And again, I was the set play taker, so we had a good relationship like that. And we'd clash all the time in terms of quite funny, because he was very easy to wind up, and I enjoyed winding him up. So we had quite a lot of that. But yeah, good guy, absolute beast when it came to play. And then we were, one game away from League One with Torquay, which, I know Torquay fans and certainly the group itself, we lost to Stevenage, and we hadn't lost to them in like 8 games over the last few years playing against them. It was up at Old Trafford, and it was just one of those days that should have been our day, and everything went wrong. To this day, I swear that Graham Wesley, who was manager of Stevenage at the time, set the fire alarm off in our hotel at 3 a.m. because we all got evacuated the night before. He was that kind of guy that would do that. He would do whatever it took to win, and it was that type of weekend. There was a crash on the motorway on the way up, so a load of fans got held up. It was just everything that could have gone wrong did do. We got beat 1-0, and it's not a regret because there's nothing we could do about that. You have bad days, but it's one of those days where I'd love to have it again, because I think if we played that Stevenage team 10 times, we'd beat them 9 of them.
It was a bit of a sliding doors moment, wasn't it? Because of course, obviously, you're going to go from I said elation, but making the playoff final such a big thing, and then for Torquay a few years later to then drop back out again, obviously after kind of 10 years earlier, 15 years earlier, when they dropped out first time. It's kind of like it probably felt a bit like here we go, and then obviously it fell back down again. But now, did they finish second? Does that give an automatic?
No,
I'm a bit unsure because of all the Berry thing has kind of skewed the whole thing up, hasn't it? At Torquay,
yeah, it was last season. Last season they got to the playoff final in the National League and got beat on penalties. Their goalie scored a last-minute equaliser, and it went to penalties, and they stayed down. This season they'll end up finishing 10th, 8th, 9th, 10th, somewhere like that. So they're not going to come up this year either, but. Yeah, they've hit rock bottom and they've kind of on the way up a little bit. Gary Johnson's manager there now, and he got them out of the Conference South. They went as low as that.
Yeah. Did it feel like a bit of a sliding doors moment? Obviously, now kind of looking back on it,
I think so, because it just it's a one-off game. You know that things can go wrong, and we were lucky enough that the first playoff final we made a couple of years before against Cambridge in the National League, we were on it. We played exceptionally well. You know, there was 2 great goals, really strong performance. Everything was exactly as it should have been. In this game, you know, we'd evolved. We were more of a footballing team, and Stevenage were a physical team, and we'd outplayed them every time we'd come up against them. We'd just got the ball down, and now, you know, we'd just been better than them, and we were better than them. But on the day, they did what they needed to do. Believe it or not, Old Trafford, and this sounds so bitter and twisted, and I don't mean it to, and I'm not the cynical type, and I don't really go with excuses, but at the same time, we're at Old Trafford, the pitch was long and dry, so we're trying to play, and it's getting caught up, and they're sticking it over the top, and it's slowing down, and they just played the conditions better. We didn't react, we didn't adapt to what we were up against. We were expecting a bowling green, and wet and slippy and perfect for us to pass the ball around. And we didn't get that, and we didn't adapt. And they were just too good for us. They were just too strong, scored a goal, sat back, soaked everything up, and we couldn't break them down. And it's a shame, because that year had been a great year up to that point. It just wasn't to be, like you say, you know, just fine margins and sliding door type stuff.
Yeah. Excellent. So what we're going to do is we are going to pause there. And then when we come back for the second part, we will have Marv's 60 seconds and the midfield and the strike force of Nico's best 11. Welcome back to the second part of my best 11. So far, Kevin Pressman, Lee Mansell, a right back, Andy Hinchcliffe, Angus MacDonald, and Guy Branston. Hand straight over to you, Marv, for Marv's 60 seconds.
Okay, Nico. VAR or no VAR?
No VAR.
Penalty shootout or golden goal?
Penalty shootout.
Best stadium you've played in? Best away ground?
Wembley.
Pie and chips, pasta, or fish and chips?
Oh, I'm trying to be an athlete here. I'll go pie if you're going to force me. I'd take steak though.
Messi or Ronaldo?
If I don't say Ronaldo and my boy hears this, he'll batter me. But enjoy them both while you can.
Bundesliga, La Liga, or Serie A for quality?
La Liga now.
Okay.
Serie A back in the days where James Richardson was having a coffee outside on Gazette Football.
Team you supported as a kid?
Never did.
Oh, okay. Wine, beer, or spirit?
Killing me here. I'm an athlete, mate. We're talking water. Maybe sparkling water from time to time.
Okay.
I'm going crazy.
All right. I think I know the answer to this, even if he wasn't. Worst dressed teammate?
No, I can't kill Mance on that. He was terrible, but he'd come for me. Yeah, no, I'll go with the one that jumps out straight away. Tim Sills used to wear Lonsdale trainers into work, and they got wrapped in paper and burned, and they survived it, and he wore them the next day.
Marvin, one more.
Okay. Funniest teammate.
Funniest teammate. I'll go with a tie between Martin Rice and Elliot Benyon, but they were funny in a way that would get them arrested. Let's put it this way: you don't sleep on away games on the coach when those two are on with you.
Okay,
fair enough. You mentioned your penalties rather than extra time. What's your penalty record like? Any good?
Yeah, very good. Missed once. Unfortunately, it was the deciding penalty in I forget what it was, what's now the Papa John's Trophy. So away at Southampton. Mance had actually scored, I have to mention, at St Mary's. Went to, I think we did extra time back in those days. And then Kelvin Davis saved with his legs. Generally, I smashed it down the middle and he stood up long enough. And then when he dived, his legs were trailing and he kicked it out. And the following year, I scored the winner at Bournemouth from penalties. But that year, unfortunately, I was the villain.
Shame. I just wanted to, we haven't kind of gone near Forest Green. I'm just wanting to get your perspective because they're making a lot of waves at the moment in the media. Obviously, you spent a lot of time there. When you were at the club, what was it like as a player? Were they fully, I think how politically I can say this, were they fully environmentalist or were they becoming that at that time?
No, so I had two stints with Forest Green. I had 2 games with them when I left Sheffield Wednesday in 2000, and that was at the old ground. I had 1 game at the old ground well before Dale Vince and all that stuff came in, and I had 1 game away at Buxton in the Trophy, and then we had when I went back in 2005. It was the first year in the new stadium, but it was still pre-Dale Vince. He wasn't there then. So it wasn't the green, vegan. It wasn't all of that stuff then. It was just a well-run, full of good people. New stadium was brilliant. Pitch was lovely. But it was a little club in Nailsworth. You know, we were lucky. I think we got about 1,200 watching most weeks. So it wasn't terribly supported, but it wasn't big. It was just a good football club full of good people, and some of them are still there now. And obviously, they've gone through this kind of ride of Dale Vince coming in, of the going green and the vegan pies and all that kind of stuff. So they're kind of reaping the rewards a little bit there. But I've got great memories of Forest Green. Really like the football club. Still know 1 or 2 people in and around it, but well done to them for winning the league and going up, and they'll be disappointed that their managers just jumped ship and gone to Watford, but as is football.
Yes, I saw something about that this morning. We're going to move on to midfield, wherever you want to start, left, middle or right, depending on who you want to pick and how you're doing it.
Okay, so I will go in no particular order, really. They're kind of just midfield players who could probably play in any 3 of those spots. So this lad was a young player picked up from nowhere when we were at Torquay. He came over from Ireland. John Milton, who I think was our head of recruitment at the time, found him. He'd been released by Everton before getting a professional deal. He went back over to Ireland. We found him somewhere, and he came over and he was about 8 stone wet through. He was technically lovely, but never looked like in a million years he was going to be physically capable of playing first team football. Paul Buckle saw potential and we took him on, and he probably had best part of a season before he broke in. And when he broke in, he'd worked himself physically, he'd worked himself to the point where he was capable. He was head and shoulders above all of us in terms of his football intelligence. He wasn't big and strong, but he knew how to use his body and how to get fouls or how to get away from people if he needed. He was good off both feet. He scored goals. His best performance. Play for
Leeds.
He went to Leeds. Yeah, he went to Leeds. He went to Luton. He had a nasty leg break there. I've not heard from him for probably 18 months. So I'm not quite sure where he is at the moment. Just an outstanding footballer. Played for Ireland, so got international recognition. Scored, the Torquay fans would remember him most for 2 goals that he scored against Plymouth in a derby game, where first one he's kind of took a touch and turned about 35, 40 yards out and half volleyed it over the goalkeeper. Second one he stepped in. It's another great finish, edge of the box, bottom corner at pace. Fondly thought of, great guy, great lad, and just a proper footballer.
Andrew, you got it as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
You and O'Kane.
Ewan O'Kane, yeah. When you see a young player, and this is, similar to the role that I'm doing now, you're trying to spot potential. You're trying to spot, like I said earlier, you're trying to see the mind and hope that the body catches it up. And he was a perfect example of that. The credit to the guys that did see him, because there's not many, I don't think, that have brought him over like that. He certainly wasn't hot property. He wasn't one that we had to fight for. We got him in. He came in. He lived in the clubhouse. He got paid peanuts. But when he got himself into that first team, honestly, it's like when you watch the best players and they have more time than anybody else because they've seen it way before anybody else and they're in position before anybody else. And he was just like that. He just used to glide past people. The game was easy to him in the lower levels, and that's why he could go up higher and continue to do well up there.
No, I totally agree. Totally agree with you. You mentioned before that you've been manager and player, obviously, in a couple of different stints at Torquay. Out of interest, as a player, obviously coming back as a kind of player manager as well, do you worry about the legacy? Obviously, you played first in over 300 and odd games. When you come back and you take on the managerial role, do you think this might not work and I could ruin what I'm known for and the love that the fans have for me?
No, I don't think so, because the club, when I went in, it was on its knees. They had no money, they had no infrastructure. They were owned by a group of fans who were genuinely good people, really genuinely good people who were just in over their heads. They were wealthy by normal people standards, but they weren't football wealthy. They couldn't just drop 100 grand here and 100 grand there. It was too much for them. It wasn't fair or right. And several of the original guys that took over left, which left an even smaller group of people doing the job. And it was just exceptionally harsh. And I only got the job because I was local and cheap. It wasn't an extensive, let's go and see who wants to come and be Torquay manager. You didn't have Gary Johnson knocking at the door then, an experienced Football League manager who's kind of been through it and done it before. It was an opportunity for me. I was playing at Bath part-time, really enjoying it, but it wasn't sustainable over a long period. It was just part-time. So I was starting to think about what was coming next. And I'd known that I wanted to go into management for 10 years. Once I realised I wasn't going to be the Premier League player I was hoping for, my attention shifted where I knew I could carry on playing, and this was at League Two at that level. So I was 28, 29. I knew I could play League Two for another 5 or 6, 7 years. I knew I could play professional football for another probably decade. So I was going to enjoy it while I could, because once it's gone, it's gone. But at the same time, I had an eye on how I could become a good coach and a good manager, because I knew that was going to be my future. And so when I went in, I didn't really think about it like that. I thought about it as an opportunity to try and come in and really help a club that was struggling, that was close to my heart. It probably hit me how hard it was going to be after a couple of months when I started hearing 1 or 2 boos and 1 or 2 you don't know what you're doing type of things, where I'd been working exceptionally hard. I'd been doing what I genuinely believed were the right things. But we got beat at Chester on around the Christmas period, and I'd been coaching. And myself and Robbie Herrera, who was assisting me, and we'd been working on defensive structure. We'd be working on transition, all the kind of stuff that you would have. If you think you're a good coach, these are the things that are going through your head. And we conceded after 13 seconds away at Chester, and we got beat 4-1. And I was playing, and because I was player manager when I went back, and I was playing, and I looked around and I thought, what the hell is happening? We're not doing anything that we've been working on religiously for the last 3 months. It's just a group of guys out here looking like rabbits in headlights. And we got in after that game, and I was getting battered by the fans, and it looked like I would have been sacked after that game if they'd have had the money to sack me, but they couldn't afford to pay me up. So they had to stick with me. And to be fair, the chairman, a guy called Dave Phillips, was brilliant. He was a fan of mine when I played. He brought me in as manager and he had my back. He couldn't give me any money. He couldn't give me any footballing advice because he'd not been in that world, but he had my back and I knew it. And the following week, we played five-a-side all week. We made the decision that we're going to just play five-a-side all week, take the pressure off them. On the Friday, it was Boxing Day, we had Forest Green at home because you play local teams at that level around the Christmas period. We had Forest Green at home, who were top. We were bottom, and we changed the formation an hour before kickoff. Told them in the change room, which is everything that I'm against. I don't like that at all. Used to hate it as a player, don't like it as a coach or a manager. Changed to that diamond that I talked about earlier. Went out, won 4-3, battered them. Went 3-0 up. Somehow managed to concede 3 to come back to 3-3, and then scored to go 4-3. And from then on, give or take a couple of blips. But when we got to the end of February, we were magnificent. So I was never concerned about that because I knew that it wasn't going to change me. I was never going to let football turn me cynical or bitter and twisted. I was never going to turn on the fan base myself. And I knew that if I was genuine and authentic and just a good person, that it's not going to change what they thought of me as a player, even if some of them may think I was clueless as a manager. I fought through two and a half real tough years there where we stayed up twice. We had 2 great escapes, which wasn't how I envisaged it. I didn't want to be fighting at the wrong end, but I just thought if we could get through the tough times, I'd get the benefit of the good times. And unfortunately, football's not that romantic. I got through the tough times, and then somebody else got the benefit of a bit more budget and a bit more support. But that's one of those things. It happens in football, and you take your lessons and move on.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's really interesting to hear perspectives from that angle as a fan. We can keep going across midfield. Eunan O'Kane. Who's next to Eunan?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to go with a bit of nostalgia here. He was captain at Torquay, looked a bit like Tarzan, does a bit of work with BT Sports now. Just an out-and-out leader. He got bought in at Torquay when I signed in 2007. He was one of the new group that came in. So just to go back, just to touch on Mance, because I know he'd like it. Mance had got the team relegated out of the Football League.
Single-handedly?
Pretty much. I can't verify that, but I believe it was mainly his fault. And he somehow had a year left. So there was about 4 players left when Paul Buckle came in, and he was one of them. And so Paul Buckle kind of rebuilt. And one of the guys that he brought in was coming to the end of his career. I mean, he was 36, 37 when he signed him, which is brave for a manager to do because you don't give 36-year-old 2-year contracts and move them down the country. It's just not a done thing. But Paul Buckle spotted that leadership potential and the fact that this guy was another machine, physically unbelievable, ripped, which he knew, and he made sure everybody else knew. The first time he met my missus, he was sat topless on a sofa doing the peck dance while eating strawberries, which probably should have intimidated me, but I just humoured it.
Did he also play for Northampton?
He did. He played for Northampton. He played for Grimsby. He played for Plymouth. I think he played for Bristol Rovers very briefly. But yeah, he had a very, very good career, played for a very long time. And in the period that I was at Torquay, in those first 4 years where we had real success, he was a big part of the first 2 or 3 years. He fell foul to another kind of revamp when we got back into League Two, where Paul Buckle quite ruthlessly got rid of the old guard. And there was only myself and Mance survived it. And he wanted to evolve, and you understood that. It felt crap at the time, but it understood. And unfortunately, this player missed out and moved on. But he went to Oxford from there and got promoted again, and then retired there. And then he's gone into coaching and management and a bit of TV work as well.
Andrew?
Wayne Carlisle?
Oh, no.
Oh,
I wasn't thinking him. I'm saying Chris Hargreaves.
Chris Hargreaves, yes. Scored in the playoff final, right foot. Absolute worldie of a finish for somebody that wasn't very good with his right foot. But yeah, just an out and out leader on the pitch. The kind of guy where things aren't quite going right, he was good enough to sense that they weren't going right, and he'd go and wipe somebody out and take a yellow card, and he'd do something that would trigger everybody else to up their game. He'd start a fight, or he'd go and, like I say, in front of it'd always be in front of the fans. He'd wipe someone out, get a yellow card, kick off, throw his arms up. Everyone would go mad, but it would lift you. It would lift the group. It would lift the ground. I genuinely think he knew what he was doing. I think some people do that because they're just nuts. He, I think, was clever enough and good enough to pick when to do it, pick the moment. And I think football's made up. Any game of football for me is made up of a series of triggers where something happens and it shifts the momentum. And if you're good enough to be able to spot it and know what to do that doesn't get you sent off, then it's a big, big plus. And I thought he was very good at that.
No, definitely. I do remember Chris. He wasn't on my list, but I know exactly who you mean. Move across to the last position in midfield. Yeah,
so this guy probably be it's hard in midfield because I played with some really, really good midfield players. And again, I'm steering clear of the Sheffield Wednesday stuff because it just feels like I'm cheap. If it was just about the players that played at the highest level, then it would have been all Sheffield Wednesday players, and it can't be. But this guy played in the Premier League, was short and fat, and was at he was at Tottenham when Gazza was there, so he was kind of indoctrinated into that lifestyle. So he loved to drink, and he loved to drag people out with him to do that. He scored quite a famous goal. I don't know if it was his debut, but not far off, for Tottenham against Liverpool, header. At that point, he had long flowing hair, but it had gone by the time he got to Notts. He was, it seems harsh to say it, but he was a waste of talent in some ways, because if his professionalism had have matched his talent, he would have spent his whole career in the Premier League. He played centre midfield, unbelievable off both feet, did not give the ball away.
Oh my gosh, I can see him that. Was it? It begins with C.
It does. His boy,
Andrew, come on.
His boy is playing for Charlton right now. I think he's just had he's got a double barreled name. His lad has
Darren Kasky.
Darren Kasky, yes. So Kask was magnificent. He was short and dumpy, but he could cover ground. He wasn't quick, but he never ever gave the ball away because of his lack of pace. He could score goals. His set play delivery was magnificent. He would just dominate a game from the centre circle because he couldn't run, couldn't get about a great deal more. But he was just, I used to look at him and just think, God, if you'd have got diet and nutrition and S&C right, and you kind of really pride yourself on that kind of stuff rather than how good you were on a night out, you probably could have been a 500 game Premier League player. But it wasn't to be. And I've not spoke to Cass for years, but whenever I've seen him, he's always been great. He used to batter me, because I was the opposite. I was like blue-eyed boy. I just wanted to do everything right, ultra professional, never out on nights out, didn't drink. It was all about the football for me. And he used to cane me for it because I was kind of a bit sad and a bit busy in his eyes. But at the same time, we used to play snooker after training a couple of times a week. We used to play golf in the summer together. I was always really fond of him, and I think it was mutual. He as much as he gave me a load of stick, I think the day he stopped giving me stick would have been where I worried most. But he was just a magnificent player. He's gone on. He did a bit of coaching with. He used to be Gary Mills' assistant when Gary Mills was at Gateshead and then York and one or two places. And I think he's just moved up north. His missus is into horses, and so I think he's up north looking after a load of horses, race horses, and living his life.
Excellent. Lovely, excellent. So we're going to move on to up front forwards.
Yeah, so these forwards probably don't fit in a three up front, but I had to kind of cram them in for reasons. So we'd say probably quite a narrow three. Oh, well, one wide, one narrow, two narrow. So one lad, he's another one who. So I'm going for the winger now, the wide of the three. He is somebody who signed for Torquay from Crawley. He spent 18 months of his 2-year contract doing absolutely nothing other than stupid step-overs and wearing pink boots and not really getting anywhere. He was completely frozen out and told he could go. And when he finally got a chance, because there were just no players left to play and we were looking like we might get relegated out of League Two on our return, he came back in and he played with a freedom and I don't know, it's like something had happened, a penny had dropped, something had gone off that had meant that he was playing, he knew when to pass it, when to run with it, and when he did need to do his tricks to get his joy. His step over when it was done right was unplayable. You knew what he was going to do. You knew he wasn't going to go with it, but you had to cover it. And by the time you'd reacted from it, he was past you. Left winger, left-footed. Having been frozen out by Paul Buckle, when he came back and did so well, he was offered a new contract. He turned it down because he said he was homesick and then moved to Lincoln. And he's from London. So he was either really, really not very good at geography or maybe just saying it because he didn't want the wrath of Paul Buckle. He lasted a year at Lincoln. That was when Chris Sutton was manager, and they had a bad year financially and ended up dropping out themselves. He got another move to Bristol Rovers where he did really well. And from Bristol Rovers, he ended up at Middlesbrough, Forest. I think he's currently at Gillingham. He had a year over in Cyprus. Again, another one who, if he'd have had a bit more of a consistent run, could probably have been playing top champ for most of his career.
I'm gonna guess.
How long was he at the champ? How long was he at? You said Middlesbrough, and who else?
He had a year. I think a year or two at Middlesbrough and a year or two at Forest.
How long ago was that?
Oh,
not long ago. He's come back. I'm sure it was Cyprus. He went to
Where
Cyprus.
did he start? Where did he start again? At Torquay.
Crawley.
Oh no.
Right, I'm going to go David McGoldrick.
No, good shout. He was
around top in a championship, wasn't he? Or was he Cardiff?
No, he was. Are you talking about McGoldrick, who's Sheffield United? McGoldrick.
That's who I think he's talking about. Yeah. Andrew?
So I played with him at Notts County.
Yeah.
And to be fair, he was a young kid coming through at Notts County who I would never in a million years have said would have gone on and had such a good career.
All right.
But yeah, he. One sec. Sorry, I'm going to call. Decline that one. Yeah, he went on and did really, really well. Obviously, played for Republic of Ireland, and again, if I'm basing it on people that went on and did really well when I wasn't around them, he would have probably been a good shout. But no, this is more of an out-and-out winger.
Yeah, but he said he started at Crawley. Left footer.
I've only got one other out-and-out winger on here that I know is an out-and-out winger. Now, but he didn't. No, but you play with him. He was an Exeter boy, Dean Moxey.
Who was?
Yeah, Moxey. I could have claimed that one. I played for England C when I was in the National League.
I did the research on England C. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could have claimed that one, but again, I'm trying to be true to what I felt like I really played with, as opposed to there was another lad who was a similar ilk that actually, as I was saying it, I thought about him and I hadn't really put him in as part of this, but he's almost the exact same type of player and CV. So there's a lad at Kidderminster called Marvin Johnson. And Marv is at Sheffield Wednesday now, and he went to Middlesbrough as well. So he went from Kidderminster to Oxford to Middlesbrough to Sheffield Wednesday, and he was exactly what I've just described, just a winger that kept scoring.
And he was at Forest as well. Was he not at Forest as well?
I don't know if he went to Forest. The guy I'm thinking of, you're never getting it. The guy I'm thinking
Hold on. Was he Scottish?
No.
Oh.
Definitely not.
I was just no. I don't. Oh, yeah, go on then. I'm not gonna embarrass myself and say it.
Mustafa Carriol.
I know the name. I know.
Yeah,
I know
never
the name.
So Muzzy, Bucks froze him out almost the minute he got him in. he got him in, and he was a bit of a show pony. It was, flicks and tricks at all the wrong times. And then I remember him starting a game, and he turned up in pink boots, and he played, and he was horrible, and he got dragged at half time, and he never saw the pitch again until we got down to the last few games of the season, and I think Bucks was under major pressure. Looked like he might get sacked. We were right near the bottom. Things weren't going well. And Muzzy came off the bench and scored an equaliser away at Cheltenham. And then from there on, he played, and he was just unplayable. He was absolutely magnificent for the rest of that season, and off he went, and obviously did some great things. So that's one I say. I could have easily had Marv Johnson, who was just as good, but that was in the National League that he was doing it. So I just gave Muzzy that one just ahead of him.
Excellent. So the other two forwards.
Yeah, so again, one that I've got to put in, otherwise I'd get battered. So if you don't get this, you've definitely not done your research. Scored the winning goal to get promoted at Wembley for Torquay while wearing a Zorro mask. Absolutely milked the arse out of that. Somehow managed to get a set of mugs in Torquay's club shop with that one. He was there for the first 2 years. He'd had mixed success. He'd done really well at Aldershot. He'd gone to Oxford and had not had a look in. Paul Buckle had signed him in that kind of revamp period post the Mansell decline. And he'd come in, and he was just, when you strike up a relationship with a striker, when my strength was delivery into the box, whether it was from open play or set plays, I had a long throw. When you've then got somebody who's 6'2", got an absolute leap, wins everything in the air, and thrives off crosses, it was a good mix. And we just had almost a sixth sense. I can remember goals now where, we'll have a free kick and I've just caught eye contact and clipped one in quickly, and he's moved quickly and headed it. And you just think, we get each other and this really works. And he scored 20 goals both these seasons, pretty much, with Torquay in the first 2 years that I was there. He was part of that promotion squad. He was also, similar to Chris Hargreaves, he was got rid of unceremoniously when we got back into League Two. He could never quite take the step up into League Two. He had one go with Oxford, it didn't work out. One go with us, it didn't work out. But he was a top National League player. He left us. He managed to get another Wembley appearance in the trophy final for, who was it now? A non-league team who I've gone blank on. But yeah, just probably the striker that I had the best relationship with. And, I got an absolute bucket full of assists, and he got a bucket full of goals because of that relationship.
Did he also play for, did you say Oxford, you said?
Yeah.
I mean,
he'd be seen as a bit of a legend at Aldershot. He'd be seen as a waste of time at Oxford. He's currently managing a team towards the pool somewhere down there. But yeah, he would be. There's two people in if any Torquay fan ever talks to me, there are two people that they'd always associate me with. First and foremost, Mance, because it was always bromance and all that kind of stuff. And then the next in line would be this guy.
I've been brutally honest. I've not had time, I said, to do the research. So I'm going to throw a guess in Plummer. Is it Plummer?
No. Tristan Plummer. No. Tristan, he had a brief spell with Torquay. What was a bit hit and miss.
Isaac Christie.
No.
That's the only ones I know.
I stopped reading when I was a younger player. I used to, before kind of everything became so easy on social media, they used to have like fans forums where people would discuss like how you were getting on and players and so on. And I got tipped off onto one because somebody said something nice, and I read it and I thought, that's quite nice because we were doing well. And then a little bit later down the line, I came second in a who's the biggest pie eater contest, and it was Billy Key came first, and I came ahead of Isden Christie, and Isden was big, and I thought, I can't deal with that. mentally I can't cope, so I never read one again. So I don't think yellow was very flattering, is all I can put it down to, because there's no way I was finishing above Iceland. But
right,
yeah,
I'm going to chuck it out there. Matty Taylor.
No, never played with Matt.
Oh.
So right, it's not Matty Taylor then. The only other two I have in my head is Scott Rendell.
No, very good player. Very good player.
Was that Lou,
yeah, clever player. Ren, I think, did go to Oxford, and
that's what. And he played at Aldershot as well.
He did. Yeah, no, he did. So yeah, good shout. Good shout.
No, you've done this. Go on, then you have to tell us. Go on.
Tim Sills.
Tim Sills.
So if any Torquay fan would rave about him, yeah, you'd get shot down by any Torquay fan listening to this now that you wouldn't know Silsey. He did his cheek in the run in to the playoffs, and rather than miss out, they got him one of those kind of Zorro looking Phantom of the Opera type masks, and obviously it just tied in brilliantly because he scored. It was actually Carlisle. Wayne Carlisle should probably be in this team, but I can say now that he's not. Wayno was magnificent, like a proper player. But he put a cross in for Silsey at Wembley, and there was a bit of a, like the England 1966, they think it's all over comment. So the commentator says, Carlisle looking for Benyon, Sills, and Sills comes in late, and he puts this ball in where he zings it head high, picks somebody out. It wasn't like a cross into an area. He picks him out with this ball. Absolutely magnificent. And Silsey comes in with his mask on, like classic him, jumps, heads it top corner and runs off. And there's a great picture at Torquay of him celebrating in front of all the Torquay fans at Wembley, where he's kind of running off with his mask and all that. And yeah, we had a bit of a charity reunion over lockdown, like a Zoom reunion about the lads that got promoted, and Silsey was on there, and they'd actually made mugs about Zorro and all that kind of stuff. And when I battered him about it, he said apparently Nicolson takes a corner doesn't make for a good selling. Stick it on a poster or a mug. Apparently, no one's going to buy that. So yeah, he wins.
Excellent. So last one in your 11.
Yeah, like again, really tough one. So there were players like Rene Howe who did really well scoring goals when I was at Torquay. You've mentioned Rendell, really good. I had some decent strikers throughout my career, really, that I played with, but it came down to one of two, and they were both at Notts County. So both Notts County players. The one I'm going to go with is the one that I speak to more often. So again, I'm bottling it a bit, so that I don't get abuse. I play golf with him from time to time. He was a technician. He was another one similar to Kasky. Wasn't endowed with physicality or athleticism, but was way ahead of everybody with his football brain. Scored a shed load of goals, and every type of goal. He was capable of your classic striker tap-ins, but he's also the kind of guy. He had a run where he just became really, really good at chipping goalkeepers from the edge of the box. So he just kept receiving it with his back to goal, dropping a shoulder and dinking the keeper. He does the radio up there now. He played for Derby. He started at Derby. He played for Wickham. He was a bit of a journeyman, went around a few. He really kind of found a home, I would say, at Notts County. And as much as football is, you work with loads of great people and you become friendly with lots of people. You don't stay in touch with that many. It's quite sad, really. You move on and that's it. You're on to the next group, and it's very rare that you stay in touch with somebody over a long period of time. But he's one of the guys that I have done. Not very good at snooker or golf. I beat him pretty much every time we play, but he tries. Just in case he listens to this, that'll annoy him. He left Notts County. He got a move to Barnsley. Did all right at Barnsley. Looked like he was coming to the end of his career, and then had a little kind of Indian summer where he went to Lincoln, and he was playing up front with Jamie Forrester, who's another lad that I used to play with.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah, so Jamie Forrester I played with briefly at Northampton. But yeah, he struck up a partnership with him. Now that would have been the most immobile front two that you've ever come across at that stage, because they were both about 36, 37. But they scored loads of goals, and Lincoln got to the playoffs, if not promoted from League Two. So yeah,
was that the time when the brothers were there? What were the brothers called? Was that time? What were the two brothers that one ended up taking control of Huddersfield?
Ooh.
Recently? It wasn't that long ago. There were two brothers. There were two brothers that were managers.
Oh, the Cowleys.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, Cowleys.
Yeah, no, it was before then. It was before the Cowleys. Cowleys came through. I used to manage against those guys. They're good guys, to be fair. So they were at Braintree, and then they got Lincoln, and then they went to Huddersfield, and now Portsmouth. Yeah. The guy that we're talking now, 2005, 2006. So he would have left Notts County in about 2004. Had a year or two at Barnsley, and then a year or two at Lincoln before he packed up. I think he had one more crack at Shrewsbury briefly, but that didn't quite work out. So,
no, I'm out. I don't know. I can't even guess.
So the one I was going to go with was an Australian lad, Danny Allsop. He was the opposite of what I've just said. He was powerhouse, like absolute monster physically. Got moved to Hull when Hull went from like League Two to League One to the champ. And he was a big part of going through all that. But he just misses out to Mark Stallard, who you would have 100% played against Stall.
Yes, I have. As soon as you said it, next stock. As soon as you said it, Mark Stallard, definitely 100%. Yeah, I have.
So Stall, yeah, he was a proper footballer, proper player, and. Yeah, he wasn't easy on the eye. He wasn't pretty. He hated pre-season. He was the opposite to Mance. He was good with the ball, but couldn't run. So he was very, very good. Scored so many goals and so many different types of goals. And just, again, the modern game, it cries out for athleticism now, whereas he wouldn't have that. But I still think he'd be able to play now because he was so clever, so sharp in his mind.
Excellent. So we've got our 11. Final question. Marvin, over to you.
Okay. So which manager is going to lead this? It could be you, for all we know.
Definitely. But I can't do me now, can I? After you've made it sound like I'd be a wrong one for doing
it. We've swayed you out of left back, and I've swayed you out of manager.
Yeah, you've dropped me twice from my own team here. So.
Who would you say is?
There's some good managers over the years. Who you maybe influenced you a little bit? You've taken ideas from certain managers.
Yeah. So I have been really fortunate. I've been fortunate both ways. I've had some really bad managers, and you learn a lot from the bad ones, especially when you want to go into it. So I think it'd be easy to kind of try and name drop. So again, going back to the Sheffield Wednesday days, we had Ron Atkinson. So obviously top manager. But at the time, it wasn't that much to me. He gave me my opportunity. He was the one that put me in the reserves at Sheffield Wednesday, which back then was a big thing. Youth team to reserves was a big step, and I was really grateful, and he was good to me. But I didn't see that much of him. And the bits that I did see, it's again the evolving nature of the game. He was pretty basic. It was up, back and through, full back to big Andy Booth up front, Andy Booth down into midfield, get it out to the wingers and go and get the ball in the box. It's changed a lot from that now. We had Danny Wilson. Danny Wilson was excellent, but struggled with your Di Canios and your Carbonis because Danny was a working man, Yorkshire guy, hard work, and all of a sudden he's got somebody bringing his hairdresser in. I can imagine what was going through his head at that point. Paul Jewell was an absolute nightmare. He hated me, treated me awfully, but it taught me some good lessons. And then I had someone like Billy Dearden at Notts County who was, he'd done really well over a period of time. And but he was like your granddad. You'd do anything for him. He was just lovely, just a top guy. But I think that the top three I would probably give you in terms of guys that I took the most from, I think when I was at Forest Green, the full year that I had there, we had a guy called Jim Harvey, who was at Morecambe. And Jim was the best I ever saw at taking limited players, because with all due respect to all of us, we're playing in the National League, so we can't claim, I like to say in the grand scheme of things, we're elite because so few players become professional, but at the same time, we're in the National League, so we're not quite messy. And he was excellent at putting players into a system and giving you limited options that brought everybody together to play in his style, which was play, play, play. So he taught me a lot about the finer detail of coaching, particularly with players where you young developing players, give them some real clear structure. And then as they get confident at it, they'll start to bring their personality into it. And he was brilliant at that. The best man manager I ever played for was Martin Ling. So he came in at Torquay. So the best manager, the guy that I would give this title to, the best guy, the guy that influenced me most and still does when I talk to him, a guy called Paul Buckle, who took me to Torquay. Yep. He was, again, it's incredible football, because if you speak to Bristol Rovers fans and if you speak to Cheltenham fans and even Luton fans would probably talk ill of him. He did not do well at those places. But at Torquay, he was a fresh, hungry manager that came from Exeter's under-18s, and he was doing a bit of their coaching for the first team. He came in, he rebuilt, he was detailed, he was driven, he was energetic. When he walked in the room, he lit the room up and you knew he was there and you were ready to work. He was structured, he was clear. You played, I think he got the best group of players that I've ever known together in terms of he went and did his homework on us as characters. And when he put us together, he kind of let us organically figure out how we were going to play. Because I don't think he particularly meant for us to be relatively direct, because a lot of it was up to Sills, down into midfield, balls out wide, wingers that could get at people, heavy reliance on set plays, long throws, which was great for me because that was me. But you would run through a wall for the guy when you were in his starting 11. His weaker areas he was brutal. So if you weren't in his starting 11, you didn't like him much. And if you weren't in the squad, you hated his guts, because he didn't really give you too much of a soft landing when you weren't in his team. But he had a way that when you got back in his team, you were right back wanting to do it for him. You want to show him, like, you show him he was wrong and all that kind of stuff. Right. But he was so good with that. So he, for me, had the whole package. He's over in America now as a consultant, doing really well. So he's built a brand and he does well with it, and he's got a great lifestyle going on. And I still speak to him and pick his brains from time to time. And I've got nothing but respect and admiration and gratitude for what he did for me. I had my best times at Torquay as a player, and there's no doubt in that. But when he left, Martin Ling came in, and I had probably my best individual seasons with Martin Ling. Although we didn't get promotion, I got in the League Two Team of the Year in 2012. And Martin Ling came in and Bucks had drilled us. So we knew where to be, when to be there, wherever the ball was, this is where you should be. We were just military. It was absolutely on point all the time. We just knew without thinking, because he'd done it for 4 years. And then Martin Ling came in, and he was the best man manager I've ever come across. He was the opposite. So if you're in his starting 11, you loved him. If you're on the bench, you still loved him. And if you got left out, you still thought he was great. He was just a top guy. Now, his training was basically warm-up, passing drill, five-a-side every single day. So we got to Christmas and we didn't do well when he first came in. And we got together, myself, Mance, a couple of the experienced players, and went and knocked on his door and said, look, we just think we need to do a bit more work. Like we're not training enough. We're not working on stuff. We're just playing five-a-side. And he was like, yeah, no problem. We'll do a bit of that. So we did a bit of that, and we picked up, and we ended up getting we should have gone up automatically. We made the playoffs and got beat at Cheltenham. But he was just outstanding at getting the best from you. But I think he got the best of what we were because of the Paul Buckle stuff before him. Right. We didn't need to train as much as what we thought we did, because we knew it. And we knew it subconsciously. We didn't have to think about it. We just got there, and he just made you feel great. So it was quite a nice mix. So I love my time with him. But I think those three would be at the top of the tree for me for those different reasons.
Excellent. Fantastic. So I want to say on behalf of myself and Marvin, thank you so much for your time, Nico. It was so great to speak to you. And that was Kevin Nicolson's, Nico's, My Best 11. Thank you so much for your time.